So, a very good morning to all of you. Now, we have a very interesting panel discussion on the theme that is resilience redefined. And as panelists, we have Dr. Rubina Bose, who is currently the Deputy Drug Controller at the Central Drugs Standard or Control Organization. She comes with a regulatory experience of more than 20 years. Welcome, ma'am. We have Dr. Manish Diwan, who does not need any introduction, but for those of you who don't know Dr. Manish, he is the head Strategic Partnership and Entrepreneurship Development at BIRAC. We have Mr. Ashwin Raghuraman, who is an early stage tech investor, venture capital fund manager, institution builder, startup advisor, and policy contributor. He is deeply involved in India's startup ecosystem for over a decade. He is the founding partner of Bharat Innovation Fund. We have Mr. Mayur Shetty, who is the founder of BlackFrog Technologies. Mayur leads the business development efforts for BlackFrog. His interests lie in human centered product design and social entrepreneurship. And as a moderator, we have Dr. V. Premnath, who is the director of Venture Center. He brings a considerable experience in technology development and commercialization. He works with startup companies and engaging with large corporations on research and consulting projects as a project leader. He is the session moderator, and I would hand over the session to him. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Amita, and welcome everybody to this panel. The panel title is Confab Resilience Redefined, and it is also the theme of this BIG conclave. Let's dive into it. We have a very interesting panel today, an interesting and diverse group. We have somebody who represents the investment community in Ashwin. We have somebody who represents the innovation agencies, the national ecosystem builders, and the funders in Manish. We also have somebody who represents the regulators, especially in the context of the fact that a very important part of ecosystem for many of our innovations in which BIRAC supports are regulated products. And we have Mayur, who is a startup entrepreneur, young entrepreneur, who has been building very interesting products, very relevant to the pandemic at this time. And Abhinav as well, who I hope, I'm not sure if he has joined already, but he will join us from a young biotech company and has been developing very interesting products for COVID as well. And I, of course, represent the incubation community and technology developers as well. So what I thought we can do today is focus on a few topics which reflect not only different aspects of resilience of not only our ecosystem but our startups as well, and that's very relevant in the current context of this pandemic. And I'll pick on both for startups and also the resilience of our ecosystems as well. The startups itself, by definition, are expected to be nimble, responsive, and the resilience has to do with that, that whole idea of bouncing back when faced with difficulties. And I can't think of any other community which is more nimble and able to react quickly or be opportunistic, act with speed, and be resourceful in such pressing times. So, I mean, it's not surprising that startups have been able to act in very interesting and quick ways at this time. But of course, there are very severe challenges facing all of us, and it's a good time to try and learn generic lessons which everybody can carry from the experiences of our panelists today. It will be nice to see what to expect, what could be good lessons to carry, some case studies, what is the outlook for the future from key aspects of our ecosystem, and how is it going to impact our ability to bounce back as an innovation community. And of course, the ecosystem that supports startups has to be also resilient. I mean, has to be nimble. Otherwise, it's too slow to help a startup community, which is so dependent upon being on acting fast. So let's dive right into it. In fact, if you look at the beginning of the pandemic, and as the lockdown was announced, it was it was extremely clear that startups were going to change the game in India, right from the very beginning. I think it was within a few days of the announcement of the first lockdown that MyLab announced its first indigenous RT-PCR kit, and was the first Indian approved kit, a startup which was able to do that. And it became sort of a symbol of resilience, redefined, and a poster child for all startups. And since then, of course, there's been so much that has happened where all companies have contributed in many ways to various aspects of diagnostics, the PPE kits, and now even in many other domains as well. So, of course, whenever resilience is really called into question or tested when there are problems. So let's first hear from our entrepreneurs and our innovators. So I'll request Mayur to start first and tell us how have things been through the pandemic. What are the difficulties that startups have faced, and also the opportunities that you might have seen along the way, and how have you responded to it? And then we can take it ahead from there after you're done. Yeah, please go ahead, Mayur. I think you're on mute, Mayur.
Yeah. Hi, sir. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Mayur Shetty. I'm CEO of BlackFrog Technologies. We work on improving immunization supply chains. A little bit of background on the kind of work we do. We develop portable medical grade refrigeration systems for last mile delivery of thermally sensitive biologicals. And we, when the pandemic struck us, we were at a stage when we were transitioning from completing product development and stepping into field evaluation. So that's the one thing you can't work from home. So that was quite difficult for us because we were really hoping to get out in the field and validate the product. So when during the first lockdown, and we had about 10-15 units ready to be deployed with purchase orders in place, and then we had to shut everything down and get back home. But I think it was about 7 days wait where we just sat and nobody knew what was going on. But then I think the inflection point was when the director of AIIMS came on TV and he said that there's a lot of false negative cases arising because of improper handling of samples. And this kind of struck a chord for us because we had seen this over the past couple of years. We had seen, we talked to virology experts where samples were being transported. This could be something as a spinal fluid that is transported from a point of collection and that reaches a laboratory. And we've heard of health technicians claiming that when the samples reach them, the entire vial is just empty. It's not maintained under the right conditions. There's no cold chain and there's nothing left for you to be testing. But then you can't exactly go back and tell the patient that, can you please undergo this painful procedure again because we screwed up during transport. So what do you do with the test results, right? So that raises the question. And then this got our curiosity up, and then we ended up talking to the district health officials, and they clearly talked to us about the problems they are facing with cold chain transport, the VTMs for COVID-19 specimens. And we knew we were at the right place because COVID-19 specimens require the same temperature control that a vaccine would. BIRAC had funded us and supported us to develop a last mile delivery system for vaccines, but we just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And that's when we took the strategic decision of coming back to the office. We pulled all of our team together. We met with the district officials. We got permission to operate so that we can put together some of the units, at least the ones that we have in inventory, so that things go out and we're able to give back to the community. So, and this raised two challenges. One is the fact that we're in a very small town where establishing credibility for a startup company. I mean, except for policemen and doctors, nobody else had any form of credibility to go out into the road. So even with the district administration's permission, it was very tricky for us to individually contact each of our engineers' parents and talk to them about why it is critical for these young boys and girls to come back to the office and help us putting these devices together. And secondly, we had purchase order for this. These were meant to go out to particular clients, and now we've decided on giving it free of cost to district hospitals. So I got a lot of grief from a lot of our supporters and partners where they were constantly going on about you are not running a non-profit. End of the day, you have to look at business. You cannot just keep donating units, right? But I mean, what's the alternative here? It looks like a post-apocalyptic scenario. The least we can do is at least give out the units that we have in place so that they can use it. And this worked out really well for us because 8 months later, we have the kind of UI UX data from the product that we could never have imagined. We're at a place right now where, I mean, had it not been for this, none of the primary health centers, it was very difficult for us to explain for a ground level healthcare worker about the problems with cold chain. So they were always under the pretext that an ice box or a thermos flask with ice cubes were a good form of refrigeration and it actually maintained the appropriate temperature. So there was a lot of technological inertia which we could overcome because of this pandemic. These healthcare workers would constantly call us 3 times a day, talk about the product. They would say, this is a problem, this is not a problem. The number of samples are going up every single day. Can you reduce the weight? So the kind of valuable data that we got to improve the product, it's put us at a position right now where we are confident that we can take it to the next step when the COVID-19 vaccines are ready. And most importantly, the nuances of public health and the way that a primary health center operates is something that we could have never learned had it not been for this. I mean, collection of samples is the backward process of delivery of vaccines, right? It's the same thing, but the other way around. So this is very critical. And I think my personal experience with this, I think the most heartwarming thing about this for me was that the sense of scientific temperament that we could see build up among all communities of people. I mean, everybody from policemen to postmen are talking about vaccine kab aa raha hai. And that is beautiful. I mean, you can see the kind of importance we give to masks and using hand sanitizer, which was never a thing in the past. So the kind of respect we have for science and technology right now because of the pandemic, I think that's a great opportunity that we as India, we should be riding on, moving ahead as well. So, yes, sir. Thank you for...
I think we in Pune too saw so much dynamism from all our startups. It was really heartwarming to see so much energy and courage and motivation among all team members and the founders infusing so much energy into their team members. And it was also interesting to see that in the context of the government and various other agencies projecting the potential of startups, even the police were very sort of keen to explore what startups could do to help them during this pandemic itself, and therefore provide certain permissions that were required for operations during the pandemic as well. So I think this was something which was very, very heartwarming, as you said. I think let's move on to Abhinav. Abhinav is a PI and a scientist with Diti Life Sciences. And I think he probably also has a story of how it's this pandemic has essentially changed the SWOT tables of every company and organization. Every challenge, some of the more enterprising and resilient startups have converted them into opportunities and not let it be a threat. So Abhinav, over to you. You can tell us about how things shaped up and how did you make survive through and maybe even thrive through the pandemic.
Yes. Abhinav, sorry to interrupt you before you speak.
Yeah.
Dr. Premnath, with your permission, I'm getting a prompt from the admin core.
Yeah.
They are requesting all participants to visit booth and cast their vote. Today is the last date, so by 12 noon, all the votes will be collected and the best booths will get awarded. So it's based on the participants' votes. So request everybody to kindly visit booth and cast your votes. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, the booths are on the left. You can see it on the left side of your screen. Yeah, the icons. Please continue. Enough. Thank you. Thanks, Manish.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And I would like to thank BIRAC for giving us this fantastic opportunity to bring all of us relevant stakeholders on a common platform once again. And first of all, when this thing arrived in India, this crisis arrived in India, and so testing was one of the biggest challenges. Unavailability of reliable testing kit was one of the biggest challenges, and we saw that there were few rapid antibody tests which Indian government imported, but when they entered into the market, they performed very, very badly. And since then, the sentiment was totally different that flow-based antibody tests are not a reliable marker for COVID-19. Either infection or exposure or surveillance, for any purpose, they are not right fit. So one of the biggest challenge before us was to have, first of all, a good quality raw material. You need a good recombinant protein to capture antibodies with good affinity. And we tried to procure some antigens from outside. We tried various sources, known sources, new sources, but it was really actually very bad quality. Whenever we used to get some antigen and they used to say it is 8 mg per ml, we used to run an SDS page. It was just smear and nothing else. So one thing was very clear, that if we have to make a good lateral flow test, we have to develop our own antigen. Second challenge was availability of confirmed positive serum samples. So by then, I'm talking about April month. So by that time, there was no guideline from the government that who will be the authority to give us the positive serum samples. We were running from pillar to post, from hospitals to hospitals, but they also had no idea what to say to us. But eventually, a guideline was issued by Niti Aayog, which made THSTI a nodal agency to deal with all these things. And then we first of all took permission from our institutional biosafety committee. Then we wrote to THSTI, and very gratefully they provided us a pool of 100 serum samples of PCR positive, COVID positive patients. And although they didn't know that which serum sample has antibodies, which does not have antibodies, but at least we had something to move ahead. Then we started designing cDNA constructs, and we took multi-epitope based chimeric fusion antigen development approach, wherein we picked up more than one target, like nucleocapsid antigen and spike antigen, also immunorelevant fragments of them, because you can't just and express the entire 2000 amino acid protein at one go. So we took relevant fragments of these important targets. And one very important thing that, as Mayur also stated, this crisis taught us many things. So one of the major learning of this crisis was that how to make more than 10 clones in 2 months with 3 people in lab.
Yeah.
Expression and purification, refolding, everything optimized. So we generated many clones because there was nothing in the literature. We had no idea what we were actually doing the right thing or not. It was based on some computational analysis, some previous study from original SARS in 2003, and then our own experience with various pathogens.
Yeah.
So we developed quite a few antigens. We tested them first in dot blot and ELISA. And once we saw that, yes, couple of the antigens were really, really very strong in reaction with positive serum samples, we started using those antigens in developing our indigenous lateral flow test. And we were able to produce a stable gold nanoparticle conjugate, which was so good that it was able to detect IgM even within 5 or 6 days of onset of symptoms in some of the patients, as the sample provided by THSTI. So with that, we developed our country's first fully indigenous lateral flow antibody test, and we submitted it to ICMR. By then, the impression of COVID antibody rapid test was totally bad in the views of ICMR, which was quite understandable. So they took their sweet time to evaluate our test, but eventually it got passed with specificity of 99% and sensitivity of 98%.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a manufacturing license from CDSCO, and right now the product is commercialized. It is in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that no other Indian company has indigenously developed raw material for COVID antibody test.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have corona antigen test also.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, we have developed monoclonal antibodies in our lab against nucleocapsid antigen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also approved by ICMR, and we are just waiting for manufacturing license for that.
So are you also going to look at mAb-based therapies now?
No, sir, that's a totally different domain. I mean, the route goes through the same, scientific challenges are the same, but the setup, the requirement, and regulatory approvals, these are entirely different things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's actually quite interesting to see how there were so many different opportunities that that opened up for just because there were gaps in the supply chain and so on and so forth, which we were able to fill up. Interestingly, none of this would have been possible if we did not have a pool of innovators and entrepreneurs already created. If we did not have have a rich set of expertise and capabilities to draw from, where would we have been able to react quickly and produce solutions in short notice? So I think that is a very important indicator of the resilience of the ecosystem as a whole, and the ecosystem that the country has been able to build, especially in the biotech space with BIRAC in leading this effort. I think I'll move on to Vishal now. I'll move on to Ashwin now. I wanted to request Ashwin's input. Entrepreneurship was never easy for anybody, right? But of course, this COVID has amplified the ups and downs and probably even squeezed them into a much smaller time period. But that said, you deal with a lot of portfolio companies. You've also been watching a lot of startups all through your career. What are some of the things which you have seen which have allowed people to change challenges into opportunities, probably be resilient in such difficult times, and try and explore things which they may not have done in the past? One of the things which I especially was struck by was the fact that COVID basically made sure that you had your priorities straight, right? You really could cut down on all the flap and focus on what really mattered. So I thought maybe you can comment from your perspective of looking at so many different startups.
Yeah, thanks, Premnath. You're right. And let me first congratulate the people who decided on this topic, the organizers, and use the word resilience. Because if I had to define, or if I were asked to define the most important entrepreneurial trait in one word, I would choose resilience as that character. So I think it's a very important sort of discussion. Also, this is not something for just now and COVID, right? I mean, it brought it to the fore, but we've seen over the years entrepreneurs who succeeded are the ones who've been more resilient than the others. And I think that trait is extremely important, simply because, when we as investors, we decide to make an investment in a startup, you'll see a couple of slides in our investment memo or pages, not a couple, sometimes it runs into many pages, which call out what are the risks that we foresee that this startup will go through. And every single time almost, we try and identify all the risks, but there will be some risk that we have not identified that will come to the fore and the entrepreneur will suddenly be faced with, right? And we would have never anticipated it. The nimbleness and the ability to say, okay, I've not planned for this particular risk because I never even thought about it. But the ability to respond very quickly on the go when it hits you is a trait. And I think I've seen the successful ones have been able to do that very quickly. And in some cases, as you pointed out, actually turn adversity into opportunity. Right. And we have, for example, one of the companies in my portfolio currently, a company called Zumator Biologics, actually when COVID hit, was thick in the middle of going through its preclinical studies, right? And they were pretty tight on timelines, pretty tight on cash, and very clear schedule towards an IND filing. And suddenly it hit us, and we were stuck with not being able to do some of the things that we wanted to do. There were some toxicity studies in primates that had been planned, and suddenly the entire primate supply chain had got disrupted. There were some ex vivo studies that were due to kick off in Mount Sinai Hospital. And as you can imagine, no hospital was interested in any sort of R&D work when you saw the number of cases and number of patients that the surge in hospitals like these. And so the first question was, how do we deal with this? And I think one of the other participants spoke about the fact that they couldn't even get to the lab, and that was the other challenge, where when you were trying to do work to understand mechanism of action and all of that, you were not able to bring your researchers into the lab simply because you couldn't get out of your house. So there were many challenges, and what I think the first sort of point of action really was, how can you conserve cash? How can you make sure you're spending only on what you need to absolutely spend, push out anything to a point which is later, cut down the flab, and be very, very focused on what you need to spend on. And that's what we did. If we had gone with the original plan, the company would have been out of money by now. Fortunately, they were able to extend it by a few months. And then we hadn't been looking at a couple of things, right? Here's a company which is doing an NBE, but there were a couple of things that they weren't doing, which is looking around to see what are all the sources of funding at this point in time, and especially grant funding is a big source for startups in not just such situations, but in general. And I think the effort that we put into trying to identify potential grants and actually apply and get those grants so that runways could be extended was one point of action that we saw. The second was the company also realized that they had a platform which they could deliver as a service and make money through services engagements. And so that was a little bit of a tangential effort, but it made absolute sense at this point in time. And I think 5 or 6 contracts have come through just in the last 2 or 3 months on the services side, which again becomes a little bit more money coming into the company so that they can continue on the other pathway that they're going on and do it extremely strongly. So I think what happens is when there is adversity, you realize that you have to really come to the fore and look at all possible options. You mentioned there are entrepreneurs who just came to the fore, and I could see that in many of our portfolio companies. Founders, really you could see the aggression coming out, right? They realized that their backs were to the wall to a certain extent, and you could see a little bit of almost a personality change in how they reacted to it. We had, for example, an unprecedented situation where a founder got stuck in an Airbnb on the outskirts of Houston for 2 months, and he had to run his entire operations from there and communicate with his team. And we're able to do all of that. So if you ask me, again, just the one thing that's really important, you'll never ever know what the adversity could be. Your ability to, at that point of time, deal with that specific issue that has hit you and think on your feet is something that is a great trait. And I think this experience would have seasoned some entrepreneurs to carry it forward as a learning as well.
Sure. I think the points you made very important. People reprioritizing, cutting the flab, focusing on the top things on the agenda, looking at new sources of revenue and funding, all of these, and of course bringing the best out of their traits, the aggression that was needed at this time of hardship. And of course, being as resourceful as possible in making things happen. I also, it's in such times that I also wanted to ask you on how has the investment community done? And in a sense, what is your outlook? Because after all, you're a very important part of the ecosystem, a really big enabler. And is it something which maybe you can also provide a little bit of outlook for all our entrepreneurs in terms of how things are shaping up and what they should expect in the coming weeks and months? You're on mute, Ashwin.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think the first reaction of most investors was to go into a little bit of defense mode. And it's primarily because we had no idea when this whole thing would end or start. We had no idea how this is going to play out. And there was so much uncertainty. And when I mean defense mode, our first sort of priority was we all have portfolios. How do we support those portfolios? How do we ensure we have cash, also reserved enough cash reserves to be able to support them to get through these hard times? I think some of the more, let me put it this way, aggressive investors very early decided that they wanted to move quickly from defense to offense, realize there are opportunities to invest in at fairly early, maybe even in the May-June timeframe, and started making those investments. But by and large, the investor community has been a little bit more conservative now than earlier. I think some key aspects have come into the fore as an investor community now, which is just not wasting cash and how plans have been made and looking at a little bit more of profitability metrics rather than just the revenue metrics and top lines, because extremely important for sustenance of startups. So there's a little bit of discipline that has come into the community as a result of that, and overspending has been questioned. I think in terms of going forward, where we stand today is most of us as investors, I've seen the broader community is really looking to start investing again and looking for opportunities again, and are investing. The big challenge we are facing is when we invest in the early stage, and even the folks who join your incubator, very important to meet the entrepreneurs and the team in person, because you're never investing in a business plan. You're not investing in just a product. You're pretty much investing, most importantly, in a team. And meeting those people and getting in a room and feeling the vibe and the chemistry is a very important part of our assessment. This is the big challenge that we are trying to figure out how to solve. We don't have an answer. We have, situations where we've taken the diligence extremely far in the process, and perhaps it's just that one meeting that will, flip it over into an investment. But I think we are also beginning to realize that maybe we will have to start making investments even without that. And so try and change the way we do our investments a little bit, where a meeting may become, a lower priority and other things get prioritized. But broadly, I see, as an investment community that things have been tight in the last few months. Entrepreneurs would have found it difficult to raise money, but that is already changing. And I think post-December, that is going to change significantly.
Yeah, and would you say briefly that it will bounce back in a big way because there must be a lot of pent-up energy waiting to come out, and maybe even pent-up liquidity. I don't know, waiting to hopefully come out when the pandemic shows signs of receding.
Absolutely. And I think the other key point is, while entrepreneurs have found it harder to raise funds, a lot of funds have actually raised good money in this time. So there's pent-up liquidity sitting with them. And hopefully that's going to get deployed very quickly and faster than it otherwise would have got deployed. Because, for funds to sit on capital doesn't make sense, because the clock is ticking and we also have to give returns to our investors. So deployment is key. And quite a few funds have actually managed to raise good money even during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think I'll turn now to Manish. Manish has a ringside view of how things are shaping up. And of course, early stage funding of innovations, building pipelines, the building ecosystem. I think everybody would, of course, like to hear from Manish on how things have been and how things will shape up. But that said, I must also point out that the Beirak team has been working very hard to push several activities during COVID, and has been guiding the process of several new technology introductions, several new funding opportunities, and that despite, of course, all the challenges. And it's been refreshing to see that. It also reflects the resilience of BIRAC as an entity, an important entity in this whole ecosystem, because we have seen in many other places where several other situations where people have got paralyzed because of this pandemic, but that's not happened for this ecosystem. So Manish, of course, you can talk from a few different perspectives. One, of course, you have an inside view of many startups and what they have been, how they have been able to respond in many different ways in these times. But also, maybe you can comment a little bit on how things are shaping up for the early stage funding for many of our startups, and how do you see things happening in the next few months? And I'm sure many startups would be anxious, and even budding entrepreneurs would be keen to know what to expect from the funding agencies as well.
Thank you, Premnath. I was listening to the individual cases, and I think Mayur, Abhinav, and Ashwin presented perspectives from individual startup as well as investment scenario. We also became very conscious when the pandemic struck. I remember this was 20th of March. That was when our foundation day was happening, and we converted that event to a virtual event. That was our first chance and a reaction to the COVID days. We have tendency to forget, right? And just it was a refreshing memory when we all spoke about that. So we realized that our startup ecosystem is a fundamental centerpiece of India as an innovation hub. The recognition that, or the critical mass that we had created of these biotech startups. And going forward, there were when we did a stakeholder meeting, inviting startups, incubators, investors, policymakers, and the components of this ecosystem, we realized that there is a danger, there is an apprehension that we might be looking at a slowdown, overall slowdown of the activity of startups, the innovation ecosystem, and this pandemic would actually drain down the energies. And because the investors had a very different perspective, there weren't forthcoming infusements of fund. The committed funds were withdrawn. The committed pre-orders were put on hold. So the whole pipeline was looking at that was a challenge there. So that was one piece, and I think we as an enabler, we realized that for the COVID, what could be the immediate resolve? What are the solutions from our existing kitty that we can make use of? So we dug out our 150 plus in-market solutions by the BIRAC supported startups and could handpick at least 20. We made a compendium and put it on the showcase that these are the solutions. For example, there were talks about step-down ICUs, remote monitoring. So these were solutions which were already being made by many of our startups. So we thought that this is right opportunity to bring a platform to them and bring the recognition. So there can be a ready traction and ready pickup. And we saw that happening also. We reached out to CSR as well as all the industry stakeholders. That was one. Second, we immediately took a resolve that for COVID, none other than our startup ecosystem can respond in the same nimble manner that Ashwin you just talked about, in the and quickly see what they can put forth. So we created provisions. For instance, solutions ideas which were quick to be deployed and ready for manufacturing. So we prioritize those which required manufacturing funding, resource mobilization, so that their solution can go in market in 0 to 3 months. So that became our highest priority. We created a provision called Fast Track Funding Initiative, in which such solutions we could, such proposals we could evaluate in 24 hours given notice. A committee was formed and we could meet, we could screen, and we can reflect back the decision within a week's time. So that was the fastest ever review process that we set through.
That was remarkable, yeah.
So that was one. Second, then we also realized that not all solutions can be made in, let's say, 3 months of deployment, right? So some research, some preparation, 3 to 6 months, 6 months to 12 months. Those are also solutions, because as we are learning, right, the diagnostic kits, for instance, the vaccines, repurposing mechanism. So mass PPEs could be quick to deploy, so that we could cater in the, let's say, 0 to 3 months proportion. So we rolled out as a larger consortium from NBM, DBT, BIRAC put together. We rolled out 2 consortium calls, inviting applications, proposals under these rest of the domains. And we have over now when we are looking at this, within 3 to 4 months, we had 1,500 applications in 2 rounds of calls. And we are almost like, I think, awarded 125, 130 such proposals. And they are now on the roll. Many of them have reached to a success and bringing their solutions to the for the service of mankind. We also reached out to our incubator community, and the BioNest committee. I'm really proud of it. You being part of it, Premnath. The 50 plus BioNest incubators, which is a place where these startups thrive and work in tandem. So the BioNest incubators were very forthcoming, and looking at the funding situation of all the startups, they decided to waive off the rentals, waive off either to 50% or to 100% for 3 months to 6 months at a variety. So that was a great relief also for the startups. From BIRAC side, especially for the big grantees, we understood that there will be a slowdown. So we relaxed their timelines and gave an extension of up to 6 months for the current running BIG programs. So for each grantee. So I think the whole ecosystem has put together a response in a resilient manner. And as we are now seeing that there is evidence, PPE kits, mass diagnostic kits, thermal scanners, many such solutions which have now in market because of this ecosystem. We have kind of, and with the help of course, the regulator, Dr. Rubina is here. So the entire ecosystem has come together, responded at the time of urgency. So about 5 years of work, we have squeezed it down in 5 months. And that's just because of this startup ecosystem, innovation ecosystem. And that has, I would go one step more, Premnath here, that has raised expectations, not only at the national level, but international community as well. And I think with the same expectation, world is now looking at India to respond back and serve and support for the vaccine initiative too. We have front runner, first in class vaccine candidates, right? And the vaccine delivery management, I think Mayur has cited one example. So many such examples we will be able to cater and bring to the forefront. And I think it has gone as a very coordinated, concerted effort for across the stakeholders. I'll stop here, and I will appreciate listening from Dr. Rubina also, who have played CDSCO has played extremely helpful role in this place too. Thank you.
I think we will request Rubina to speak next. But Manish, I'm going to come back and ask you about the outlook. I'm not leaving that for the future as well. So I think our entrepreneurs would be very keen to hear about that as well from you. Dr. Bose, in fact, it was very refreshing to see how CDSCO quickly responded, with necessary changes. Started moving on approvals, and it's been quite interesting to watch that. And of course, I do understand your hands must be full dealing with COVID, but I wanted to request you to speak not only about what all happened in terms of moving regulatory approvals ahead during COVID, but also about how things have shaped up for other products which may not be necessarily relevant to COVID, but are also part of our larger BIG ecosystem. So, Dr. Bose, the floor is yours. You're on mute, please. Can you just unmute? And then you can,
Yeah. Thank you very much. And it's really, again, it was excellent, listening to all of you. And especially when we are now at this point of time, we were all the, days and nights are going on that vaccines and how the things would be, immunization program would run. So I was really, it was so nice to hear from the first speaker, Mr. Mayur, about this, refrigeration. I was just thinking that are we really prepared? And for this, to the PHC levels and the last level, what we are going to do, how we are going to handle these. So really, it is assuring. And it was, I was with this team, I think, since such a long time. And probably I was for every weekly, there was a weekly call. I used to be with the First Hub and the team of BIRAC, as well as with the NBM sometimes on this since March for this COVID call. And I actually have learned that what is regulatory response and what is rapid regulatory response. In fact, what you were all talking about, about this MyLab and these are all in the West Zone. Being the zonal in charge of this West Zone, I know what is that, how we go for the inspections of the Serum Institute, one after another, for clearing all the vaccines, in the trial, the stockpiling. So I know what we did, and the MyLab inspections at the same time, just to share, it is, we know that what we did, the everyday going to office, there was no lockdown for us, taking special permission from the deputy commissioner, the commissioner of the police, to move my all people throughout the lockdown. When there was not a single people in the road, my inspectors and the team is moving for inspection of MyLab, preparing the report on the spot, sending we are sending the report to the CDSCO headquarters in the midnight. Doing online system. If you see my online, it's evident. If you see that I'm just 24 hours. I worked always. So I just wanted to say that we had to respond, and I know that how my team also, my entire team worked, being in the West Zone. And if you see my vaccine team, how extensively they worked, because we know that the WHO, the international agencies, what they expect from India regarding the report writing and all. So it's nothing like that you go and see the facility and do it. It's an extensive technical scientific reporting system, and which we have to do very, very extensively. And they worked day and night. So I just wanted to share a little bit of it. So as I say that we responded, regulatory response, Government of India's response came long back, before WHO declared public health emergency. In fact, in January only, the Government of India has started responding, getting into this availability of the essential medicines, the API, the N95 masks. So the people were in the market, were stopping so that there is no, export sometimes, to just see that the things are available. So there was direction from the Government of India to all the state drug controller, to the Manufacturers Association, that there is enough essential medicines, there is enough APIs for handling, for all essential medicines. It's not only that time we did not know. We actually, in the month of March, we had nothing. We had not a single kit for COVID testing, isn't it? There was not a single test kit. and where we are today, if you see the list,
Yeah,
and
remarkable.
how we worked, yes, and how we worked immediately with ICMR, partnering with ICMR, working on them day and night, preparing the validation protocol, preparing everything immediately. We learned immediate response, immediate regulatory response. So I just wanted to say that long before this, WHO declared it as a pandemic also, the Indian government has responded, writing to all the states, writing to all the manufacturers association that there is no scarcity of the APIs, medicines you stock, and that there is no undue, hoarding or by importers or those people who can do undue business. So that was another part of it, the monitoring and the vigilance and the inspectors in the field, everybody in the field. And we started monitoring the all the medicines. We have a country-wide survey, 55 plus 97, all essential medicine surveys since March, and still going on, where we are doing every week 2-3 times survey that all medicines are available which are required for the treatment of the COVID, and all as you said, that what you are doing for all. So it's for all, like all medicine. So this is done by the entire country, by entire regulatory system, the states and the CDSU inspectors. So if you consider, so those things are continuously monitored so that there is not a single, and even if there is something like the state drug controllers are given immediate direction that you have to ensure that the manufacturers are manufacturing. And if they are not manufacturing, what must be the reason? What is the reason why there is API is not available? Where from this API can be made available? All these things, everybody. So then, as you said, the sanitizers. Did we have enough sanitizers for this entire country? So there was a direction from the CDSO to all the state drug controllers for the government of India that you have to give sanitizers licenses within 3 days. Review and give the licenses within 3 days. And even those with the distilleries were also given some special permission under these COVID situations to prepare the sanitizers. For the medical oxygen, industrial oxygen, if somebody is already with the manufacturing of the industrial oxygen, you have to give a permission within 24 hours if they meet the requirements with the conditions. Similarly, for all the COVID kits, we issued public notices since March 19th, giving what is our rapid response, what are the process, the modalities, the first drug approval process which would be taken in case you have a drug already approved in other countries for COVID treatment, and then you want to bring it back. What would be the process? What would be the first drug approval process? How much data is needed? Do we need all data? Where there would be a deferment of the data, you can do the abbreviated data requirement, toxicity related to toxicity, related to stability, related to clinical study. So everything was very clearly made. We have the PRO offices that anybody can approach, whosoever is having a drug which they claim to be for the treatment of COVID, or which can be repurposed also. So all cases, there was immediate response. So from 19th March onwards, if you see our website, the list of the public notices which has been published for all, including working with the RCGM and the DPT for publishing the requirements for the vaccines guidelines, for the preclinical testing part of the vaccines, the R&D of the vaccines. There is an extensive checklist. Also, if you see the clinical trial, we knew that what is going to happen with the trial which are already going on throughout the country. So what challenges they would be facing in this situation when you say that the hospitals cannot work, what would be the patients cannot move, the subjects will not be able to. So wait, would you be able to administer the drug, the investigational product? No. So there was an immediate response that you can take any modalities. If you see there is a regulatory guidance mode, it's not in the guidance mode, but it is in the mode of the public notice. And it is in our website of 30th March. Mm-hmm. It says that whenever, so you can, understanding that there can be changes in the product administration, there can be informed consent process would be a challenge. The laboratory diagnostic testing would be a challenge. Everything would be a challenge at this COVID situation. So you can respond, you can change your protocol, you can do your amendment, you can do everything in coordinations between the sponsors, the investigators, the ethics committee, all in the electronic platform and with the communication to the regulator. So everything was made acceptable and immediately said that yes, you can do. And the list of, I can say the list is endless. Even I can say that just it's today is 28th, so 26th. If you see our the notification which has been published for the importers, that if you have an import license already valid and you are approaching for, and you have applied for the import license, then it can be continued to be valid. Like even if you are not able to process this application, so that there is no time gap for import of the medicines.
Yeah.
I mean, the import license has been made continuous if you apply within timeline. So
Yeah.
all such the vaccines testing, you know that 100% vaccines is a 100% lot testing in the country. So you have to send all batches, whatever is imported or manufactured, to CDL Kasoli for testing and the lot release. So it was immediate, the notification was the public notice, and the notice and the communication was given to the vaccine manufacturers that they can send the summary lot protocol to CDL by an electronic mode through the e-communication board and get it approved, and the products can be sent subsequently if you are already a regular importer or a manufacturer, and that can be done in the later stage. So these are which are the rules of the country, which are in the Drugs and Cosmetics Act rules. And I would like to say that we have actually the enablers in our hand. The Medical Devices Rules 2017, which is at par with the international regulations. The New Drug and the Clinical Trial Rules 2019, which has this accelerated approval process and the expedited review process. So this was a real enablers for us. So we could take all the decisions based on this. If you see into the second schedule, where you need data, where you need there cannot be any compromise with the data. Can we do a compromise with the data which is to be submitted? Even if you say vaccines are needed, can we do a compromise? No, we can't do. We have to ensure that the vaccines are safe, and the safety is important. So we took these enablers in our hand: the New Drugs and the Clinical Trial Rules, the expedited review process, the accelerated approval process, where you can take a data on the basis of phase 2 trial, or where you can ask for a more post-marketing surveillance or a phase 4 trial, and how much data you can accept right now, and you can go further. So, and the most important thing I would like to say, because we were in contact with all the international, we have an ICMRA platform where we interact with all the European regulators, WHO, yes, WHO, in the COVID vaccine trial, the various drug trial with the US FDA. And we know that though they are starting to do the rolling reviews, we know how we did started these rolling reviews. When you say the kits manufacturers have started submitting, we have started reviewing. We never said that, no, this data is still, you have just a 1 month data and we can't go ahead. No, never. We say that
it was absolutely remarkable what CDSCO did. In fact, it was stunning to see that I think the first approval within 3 weeks it was done for the kit, right? Or yes, even less maybe. But the CDSCO is sitting on such an important role in this ecosystem. It's a gatekeeper for the nation, and everybody is looking forward to it. And we are proud of what CDSCO has done in the last several months during the COVID situation. No doubt about it. In fact, it's still ongoing, as you said. The story is not over. There are lots of drug-related trials going on. There are also the CTRI, I think, has more than 150 plus trials running currently relating to COVID. Actually, much more than that. And then the vaccine trials as well, which also fall under your preview. Especially yes, the fact that India is able to look at so many different platforms concurrently is a tribute to what CDSCO has been able to move in these last several months. Would you also like to comment on I do understand that this is such a crisis that all our attention will be on it, but there will be startups who are looking at other products which are not necessarily COVID related. Is there I mean, while your resources are strained right now, is there an effort to move those as well? And will that and what is the outlook going ahead? Because now you have really shown the depth of what the depth the resident in the CDSCO network. So now we should be able to I mean, as Manish said, expectations will also go up after the COVID is over. So I think there'll be a lot of onus on your shoulders as well. Would you like to comment on the outlook as well? How would things proceed going ahead, and what about other technologies, and how can they move it ahead? And please give your advice as well.
Yeah, it may be, I can just say that initially for the first 3-4 months, we were all in putting these COVID kits into place, the drugs which are required for treatment, when the treatment was evolving, and we were preparing our treatment protocol and responding on the COVID. So those were we were looking into those availability of those drugs and the inspection. And even, most of the companies were also not working at that point of time. There was COVID infections and all, and there was, all inspections were, and we did a lot of, though it's nothing to say, but sometimes when they say that the export and they are having such a 1 or 2 products and they need to export it urgently, and there is a requirement, we did it in the virtual mode as well, with a local inspector at that place of Maharashtra or Daman or Goa, and the CDSO joined in the virtual mode to complete the inspection. And similarly, the review process went on. So there is no such thing that we are not. Now every product is now it's prioritization maybe that time at that point of time, and now it is like all whatever are coming into the way, whatever are there, the response is there, and we are as I said, we have the greatest enablers with us, the 2 rules, the new drug and the clinical trial rules, and the medical devices rules, which are helping us to go ahead. And we have the regulatory guidances published from time to time, even for the vaccines, for any new vaccines which are coming up. It's not only the COVID vaccines. So we have a lot of vaccines in the pipeline. We have a lot of other medical devices, IVDs, kits, and all, and which we are doing. So the outlook is nothing like that. That we are at this point of time.
Outlook is good. So I think
yes, of course.
our entrepreneurs should look at it and use the new facilities that you have created to move ahead on their own innovations as quickly as possible. We are running out of time, so I will just close with with a very quick response from each of you regarding what you think should be advice for our startups in these difficult times. So let me start again with Mayur and Abhinav, and they can give a quick 1 or 2 liner response to what do you think should be the way that some of the startups who are either in the early stages or very close to market and struggling with some aspects, but of course also leveraging some of the positive things in the ecosystem right now. What would be your advice to them? Mayur?
Yes, hi sir. Thank you. Sir, I would definitely say that a crisis is what forces us, and now is the time that everybody is required to step up for the nation. As startups, we definitely want to do everything in our capacity, maybe not directly in healthcare, but in any way possible. And
Mayur, you can keep the video on when you're probably speaking.
Yeah, my video is on, right?
Sorry. Continue, please. Sorry for
Yeah. Sorry. So now is the time that we make ourselves self-reliant, and startups are the way to go about it. So while it is difficult, there's job losses and there's a lot of problems with supply chain, but it's all the more reason that why we need to do this. So stick it out, and I think the rewards are there.
Lage raho, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
let's move to Abhinav. Abhinav, you're on mute. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, am I audible now? Yeah, okay. So I think that one of the major learnings from this experience has been to be early prepared. I mean, watch out for any pathogens evolving, spreading anywhere in the world. Don't wait for it to come in India and then start R&D. So we can have some kind of early preparedness as a company, as technical team, that it's right now we are in a global world. There are flights. So one thing coming up somewhere has a potential to reach to us anytime near or later. So now that would depend upon the parasite, whether it spreads with that efficacy or not. That is another thing. But the thing that we got caught in COVID crisis a bit late, it came, it spread, and then we responded. So from now onwards, we have to be a little careful that what is happening around the globe, not only in India, and keep one step ahead.
Scan for opportunities and leverage your capabilities at the right time. Yeah, Ashwin, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll request.
Yeah, I think. So I think the first part I would say, or we've advised all our entrepreneurs, is conserve cash, don't waste cash on needless things. Be careful about how you use it. And the extension of that is when you raise money, you're able to raise money. If you get additional capital, don't worry about the dilution. Always ensure there's a buffer. Entrepreneurs tend to take a little too little because they worry about dilution. Don't do that. You always need more than you think you will. And I think that is specifically true in this instance. The second thing that I've seen is, or I think has happened as a result of COVID, is that because of the way our biotech ecosystem has responded, in a sense, I do believe that our credibility as a nation and as an ecosystem has gone up in the eyes of the world. And I do believe that as a result, this is going to open up avenues of funding for our startups from not just India, but even programs that are happening outside the world. And so look everywhere, right? Don't just narrow your focus when you're trying to raise money either through grants or equity from India, but go outside and look outside as well. There could be opportunities that have opened up because credibility has gone up. The third is, I would suggest founders stay aggressive. I think it's extremely important to ensure that you keep looking for opportunities as well that may come by. Be aggressive and not, get into defeatist mode, because I think survival is the key. And if you can survive, and live to tell the story another day, there's nothing like it in terms of entrepreneurship as to what you need to do. And the fourth part I would say is be kind to your teams. We have told all our portfolio companies this, right? Pretty much as your startup is going through resource crunches and stress, individuals who are team members are also going through that. They're not sure, uncertain about their future jobs, whether they'll get something elsewhere. Try not to lay off people. Be kind to them. It'll, the law of karma will work, and they'll work hard for you in future.
Very good points, and especially the last one. I just want to point out that the real strength of startups is the collective strength of a small team and the energy that the founders bring to it. And I think we should make sure that that is not lost, because that is the great strength of this ecosystem as well. So I'll request Dr. Bose to speak next, and then we will close with Manish's comments. Dr. Bose, any advice for our startups who are looking to move things closer to the market through regulations and through trials and so on and so forth? Have we lost Dr. Bose, or Dr. Bose? Did we lose Dr. Bose? Probably. So let's just move to Manish. Manish, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. I think like on a positive note, one of our greatest worry was that post-COVID, we might lose many of our startups from the ecosystem because of this unprecedented stress. But I think this crisis had made us evolve much, much stronger, and our ecosystem has raised our one level up. It has gone to the next orbit for sure. I would request and urge that we now start thinking of becoming Atmanirbhar in true sense. Even the raw materials that we used to be dependent on sourcing in from outside India, look at alternatives. Let's develop capacities within India so that we are not dependent on even on the supply chain choking in the eventuality. And as Ashwin also pointed out, let's not stay limited to India as a market. Look at world. look at the whole world market. That is the new playground that we all have. And in the process, from an enabler's perspective, it's our obligation, our responsibility that we provide facilities for early stage manufacturing for this startup ecosystem to grow. AMTZ was one good example, pilot study that we did, initiative with DBT BIRAC, and that has panned out in this time of crisis. Like that, we will try and build places where we can provide facilitations for POC to pilot, and from pilot to early stage manufacturing. We're calling it as technology clusters. So the technology clusters would hopefully bring the next non-linear growth for our startups, which are sitting at POC stage, to fast forward their journeys to medium scale companies. So I'm very hopeful for the future.
Okay, great. So that is a good note to end on. I just wanted to conclude by pointing out that there were many lessons here for startups. It is difficult times bring out, the best of people, and very often they can be the best of times for startups actually. And it is known that some of the best startups actually rise up post such crisis events. So if you have an opportunity to pivot and thrive, please do so. If you have an opportunity to survive the crisis and then power up again, do so. As Ashwin said as well, work out ways to gauge the future, to foresee it, better to scan for opportunities. And of course, in all this, leverage your speed and agility, which is the hallmark of startups such as you, and the resilience that you're known for, and the team that founders build with passion and with consideration. And of course, there's a lot of opportunities for lateral learnings and horizontal transfer. And these are the times when you can really focus on what really matters for your company and drop all the flab and make it through this crisis. And we hope that the resilience that our ecosystem and our startups are showing today is something which bodes well. It does bode well for the country, and we hope that this is something which will shape the next generation of large companies to come in the biotech space. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much to all the panelists, and thanks to all the audience. I'm sorry I went a little bit more, but I hope you enjoyed the discussion. So we'll close here. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, before closing, I would like to thank Dr. Premnath and rest of the panelists for their wonderful, insightful session on the resilience in this preceding times, and their perspectives in terms of investment world, funding agency, regulators, incubators, and the startup world. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your insightful suggestions and your thoughts.
Thank you, Rohini. Thank you, IIT Kanpur team. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Thanks, Premnath.
Sure,
Thank
pleasure.
you. Bye.